Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session of Sunoikisis's Digital Classics Summer Semester 2019. Today, our guest is Neven Jovanovič, a professor in the Department of Classical Philology at the University of Zagreb. And Neven is going to teach a class about digital scholarly editions, needs, experiences, and possibilities. Last week we had a session about digital philology, so introducing this big topic, and today we have the possibility really to focus on what we mean by digital scholarly editions and many discussions that we have in our field to define a digital edition. Neven, well, as you know, has been contributing a lot to Sunoikisis's Digital Classics since the beginning, 5 years ago, and he has been teaching a lot also in Sunoikisis. And Neven is really a digital philologist, if I can say that, Neven, because he has been working a lot in the field of classical philology, but also digital philology, especially for his project Croala, which is online and which is a project about Latin authors from Croatia. But now, Neven, welcome to this session of Sunoikisis. Okay.
Yeah, well, hello, Monica. Hello, everybody, and greetings from Zagreb. Here at the moment you cannot see, but the present is also one of my students from the Sunoikisis class, and we will later on in this semester we will present our own digital project. But at the moment, as Monica has said, I will try to be I have to be a little less computational than our colleagues from Pisa. I will also be a little less linguistic, but on the other hand, I will show what other people are doing with text and with documents when we move them into into digital medium. Now, first, just a small request. I have this paranoia when I'm presenting on Hangout that the connection will break and that I will be speaking into the void. So from time to time, I will try to ask a very simple question. This question won't be graded or anything. So please, if anybody wants to answer or to try to answer, or of course to add something and so on, just go ahead. I will be very happy to hear that somebody human is out there listening to what I have to say. Also, I will be, at some point, I will try to switch between the slides just for you to see, well, a human face on the other side of this connection. And if this lasts a few seconds, please don't lose your patience. Anyway, this is my first challenge, so now I have to switch to slides. Just a moment, please. Okay, now I hope that you see that we are starting our discussion or our talk about the digital scholarly editions.
Neven, one thing we can see very well your slides. I only ask you to hide. There is a bar below.
Yeah.
Okay, hide. Perfect. Now it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And thanks for raising a voice, of course. My first, well, this is more of a rhetorical question, is, do you know who this is on the photo?
No.
No. Well, this is A.E. Housman, who was a British philologist, but he was actually both a philologist and a poet. And as such, he was also a very divided person, because as a philologist, one poet wrote about him. He wrote a poem and wrote that he deliberately chose the dry as dust to be his theme. So he wanted to be a specialist for specialists, and his critical editions were intended to be just a base for other scholarly editions. Also, he was very cruel and arrogant if you published something that he thought was wrong. And of course, but as a poet, he wrote very, very sensitive, very tender poems, even though the themes were a little bit morbid. And he also admitted that if he thought about a line of poetry while shaving, his skin would bristle, so he would not be able to shave any longer. So in a way, as we will see, a scholarly edition is also an entity which is both demanding and divided, and I think Hausmann is its appropriate patron for this day. Now, the plan for our session is as follows. First, we will see what scholarly editions in general, what they are, as they have developed over several centuries of philology. I will show this on examples of Greek and Latin, but of course the same or quite similar goes for editions in other languages. Then we will explain what needs of scholars are satisfied by these editions, and we will propose that a digital scholarly edition can satisfy the same needs, but in a different way. And we will show this on some examples. Now, we are lucky to have an excellent help for finding examples of digital scholarly editions in the form of two important catalogs, and we will briefly present these catalogs, and then we will go on to see 4 actual real editions, and we will show by visiting them on the internet how they function and what knowledge do they offer. And at the end, I hope we will have a brief discussion about what we have seen and what we think about it. So first, we will try to demonstrate what is a scholarly edition. Let's say, for example, that you read the 85th poem of Catullus, the famous Ode d'Amont, I hate and I love at the same time, and you want to know more about this poem. Here you can see what you will find in the annotated edition, which was made by Wilhelm Döring in 1820, so almost 200 years old now. Here is what the edition of this poem looks like in Döring. You can see that Catullus' text is surrounded by annotations. We have a title, which is added by the editor. We have a subtitle, De Amore Suo, which is again added by the editor. And there is a brief paraphrasis in Latin. It starts with the word quaerenti fortasse cur unam, and so on. And then below the poem, with words starting in words hoc distikon and so on, there is a brief textual note which says that this was not a separate, an individual poem in certain older editions. Now below that, again, there is a set of notes. Some of them refer to the first verse, some of them to the second one, but these are the notes which say where the parallels are, which Romans have expressed themselves in a similar way. There is, again, in the verse 2, with this nest, after nestskio, it says that Catullus, or the poetic subject, as we would say today, that he loved the beauty of his girl, but hated her character. And this can be explained, this can be confirmed by another poem of Catullus, by the poem number 72. So we see here that the scholar who was annotating Catullus' poem tells us different things that he knows about the poem. What is it about, or what he thinks it is about, where other Roman writers thought of similar things, and where Catullus himself expressed similar thoughts. So the scholarly edition tells us what is known, what we know about a text. So if we take a jump, if we jump 100 years onward in time, and if we look at another scholarly edition by Ludwig Kroll this time, this is an edition which is still used in German classrooms and it is still reprinted, you will see that the form has not changed much. Now, in this edition, there is no subtitle, there is no Latin paraphrase, but there is again the comment in German, which starts actually with a literary interpretation, saying that Catullus uses few words, but they are a powerful expression of his divided feelings. Again, the interpretation is much the same as with Düring. And then it states, the same thing was attempted before. Dergleichen war schon früher versucht worden. And then it goes on to list Greek parallels. Now, what has changed was obviously the direction of scholarship, but not the form in which the scholarship expresses this knowledge. Now, if I ask you now, why do we need scholarly editions? Any thoughts or comments, Peter?
I don't know, to learn as much as we can about the text and to, I don't know, get a context of what the text was used for.
Yeah, so this is what I guessed that you will say. So I guess that we use this because we want to learn what other people know. So this is what you just said. Also, we want to think about their knowledge. So we want to reassess it. So we now think slightly different things than Düring and Kroll. But also, we want to find out what other people do not know or what other people have not thought about. So we are interested in plus and in minus as well, so to say. Now, but the question for us is it really so? Do we really learn all that other people knew about the text? Not to show this what they all knew, but they didn't put into the comment. So to challenge this claim, I will present briefly a small problem that our Greek class has recently encountered. This is a passage from Plato's Critias, and I won't frighten you with the Greek, but I want to remind you that Critias is one of Plato's late dialogues, which is famous for two reasons. First, because it is unfinished, and we don't know why Plato left it unfinished. But second, because this is one of places where Plato compares his Athens to the famous lost city of Atlantis. So if you Google for Critias today, you will find a lot of these pseudoscience things about what Plato knew about Atlantis and so on. Now, in the passage 114 of Critias, we read the following, and now just for fun, I will read this aloud, where Plato says, pros de tutois, hossa euode trefei pu ge tanin, rhizon e chloes, exilon e hilon stacton, e teanthon e carpon, e ferente tauta, kai etrefen eu. So basically, what Plato says is that the land on the soil on the island of Atlantis was so fruitful that it bore in one place all the fabulous smelling scented stuffs that today grow all around the world. The problem, If we analyze the passage syntactically, we can reorganize it like this. So we can say that we know that hosa euode goes with tanin, and we can say that rhizon, echloes, exilon goes together. So these are all genitives. They are all somehow alike. And then we come to this hilon stakton. And then again, two genitives, eite anthon, karpon. So it means something like rhizon, echloes, exilon, echilon stakton are options from which one can choose. It means roots and grass and wood and everything that oozes. But is it really so? So is the genitive stakton really dependent on the genitive hilon? Are the genitives anton and karpon dependent on hilon or on stakton? So for some reason, and you know how this can happen when you look at something for too long, I was not feeling sure. So I wanted to check. So this is an excellent opportunity to consult a scholarly edition. So first edition, in a way, was the dictionary that I used. I took out the little Scott Jones, and sure enough, it turned out that our passage from Critias was listed there, but in a slightly transformed form. It says hiloi staktoi, and this, you can see this as the third example from the beginning for the meaning of oozing out in drops and so on. But Plato actually used the genitive, and I wanted to know more about dependence of genitives. So I wanted to know the reason why we construe a phrase in this way. So my next port of call was the Lloyds edition of Plato from 1914. Now, I think this is also a scholarly edition because we can consider the translation, which is facing the original in Lloyds. We can consider this an interpretation. This is the translator's statement on what is meant by Plato's Greek. Now, the translator says here that the earth produced and brought to perfection, so this is a translation of eferede tauta ke eferben eu, all those sweet scented stuffs, whether made of roots or herbs or trees or of liquid gums, derived from flowers or fruits. Now, derived from, that you can see in the next to last line, suggests that the translator saw anthon e karpon as dependent on hilon stakton. But wait a minute. The Lloyd text says eferede tauta kai eferben eu. And we had, as you can see here, we had etrefen eu. Eferede tauta kai etrefen eu. Now, what happened here? One problem leads to another. To solve this, we reached for another scholarly edition, the one by Burnett from 1902. Here is what we find here. Now, comments in this edition do not say anything about interpretation, neither linguistic nor literary. Everything is left implicit, and we are expected to know enough Greek to understand it. But the comments tell us something about what was in medieval manuscripts and old editions of Plato. And we can see that if you follow the line 3 of the apparatus, that etrefen was in two manuscripts or manuscript branches, I don't know which, A and F, and that eferben was the traditionally received reading. But this is what I see because I'm a philologist, and I know that A and F stand for manuscript group A, manuscript group F, and that I know how to interpret the colon, and I know that vulg means something like traditionally receptive, textus, receptus, and so on. And again, as a philologist, I have to guess that Burnet preferred manuscripts A and F to the textus receptus, but it is expected of me to understand why he did so. And there is no way to check my hypothesis. And of course, there is no way for me to tell how Burnet, who most certainly knew much more about Plato than I do, how he construed the dependence of genitives anthon e carpon. Now, if we turn to another important witness of traditional readings, to the famous Stefanos edition, which is responsible for all the funny numbers that we have seen, because in Stefanos, Critias is on the page 114. We can consult this edition from 1578, thanks to the internet and thanks to the archive.org. And we are doing this just out of curiosity and just because we can. So here is the text from the 16th century. And with some effort, we will see here that Stefanos prints rhizon in the second line of the funny Greek, rhizon e chloes, exilon, e hilon, then a comma, e stacton, ete anthon, ete carpon. And if we check this in the Latin translation, we will see something, we will see a third interpretation, because it says radicum graminum lignorum humorum sucorum florum fructum. So ete is not translated, and it is simply everything is on the same level. Now, you will say, this is interesting, but where is the connection with digital methods? We always, as philologists, we always have to consult multiple editions and multiple commentaries, and we always, in the end, have to make up our own minds, what does it all mean? But think about this. For us, it is hard, first, simply to get to those multiple editions and commentaries. Knowledge today is dispersed. Even if there is more knowledge accessible than ever before, it is, in a way, it is more dispersed than it ever was. Once we get to these editions, however, we see that their knowledge is coded, that you have to be a specialist to understand this. Not only that you have to know Greek, but you also have to know many small conventions, and Federico Boschetti has shown us some of the conventions last week when they discussed the critical apparatus. But you see that a simple commentary also has its conventions. And there is also a bigger problem. The problem is that the scholars often simply say, well, it is like that, and you have to believe me because I'm the professor and you're the student. So they don't give reasons for their decisions, and sometimes they do not even state that it is like that. So we don't actually know whether they omitted something because it was unnecessary, or they overlooked this or forgot or missed some fact, and so we simply don't know. For example, this comma in Stefanos Plato after e hilon, comma, e stacton. This is not in Burnet. So why is it not in Burnet? Was it not important for him? Was it irrelevant, or did he forget to put it? I don't know. So all this browsing and comparing turns up unexpected things. So we are looking for genitives, but then we see that efferben is not f-tetrafen and so on. And it may be hard to connect all those disparate bits of knowledge into something that makes sense. Now, this is what a scholarly edition should do, and this is what it should help us do. So here is a working definition by our German colleague Patrick Zahle. What is a scholarly edition? And he says in German, Edition ist die erschließende Wiedergabe historischer Dokumente. And he goes on immediately to say that the problem here is with the word erschließende. Now, and here is what Zahle writes about it. So the word suggests that the edition should enable us to know more about the text. And this more should be reached by applying reason and logic on all the disparate facts that we have about the text. So we should proceed in a manner which is called critical in English. And for Zahle, there are 4 important main characteristics of a scholarly edition. First, it stands for the document. It represents the document. It transforms it. It changes it in some way. Then it tries to apply knowledge and logic in this transformation. So it is critical in this more Greek way of meaning of the word. And then it works with documents which are not actually text. They are, in a way, they're just themselves a representation of the text, because the Greek that Stefanos printed, this is not what Plato wrote. And even if we had the autograph of Plato, we would not be able to say that this is what Plato actually had in mind always. So this is just, text is a function of many documents sometimes. And finally, these documents belong to the past. So we are not able to understand them from themselves. We can today understand a document like a Game of Thrones or something like this, because it's a document of our time. It tells us something about another world and so on. But this is actually a story for us being told today. Not so with Plato and Catullus. So the question is, how can the digital medium contribute to this task of representing historic documents critically? This is important. Many omissions in printed scholarly editions were made simply because the space available, the number of printed pages, was limited. And because of this, we were all trained, like Hausmann, whom we saw, to be, in a way, to be ascetics, to be very disciplined, and then ourselves to supply what was only implied on the printed page. It wasn't said. Every decent philologist should know this and that. So everybody should understand this, or they don't read my books. Basta. Now, in the digital medium, we are not constrained by the number of pages or by the thickness of the volume. And also, remember, for example, just remember how many times you have used Google today. In the digital medium, it is much easier to find and retrieve information. It is also much easier to include in our own work something that has been done somewhere else. So everything, those are the main advantages, I think, of a digital scholarly edition. We are not limited in space. We can make our knowledge explicit. so we can really say what we mean in so many words. We can find other people's knowledge, get it included into our own editions. But as they say, there is no free lunch.
Neven, I have a question, if I can. I'm still here. So,
yeah, that's very nice.
Okay, so if you go back to the last slide. So you mentioned important things, and here you have this thing about the space. And you say, okay, of course, the digital medium removes the constraints of space and allows us to make our knowledge explicit, not coded, not omitted. I think this is important in the sense that and before, when you said knowledge is implied in a printed edition, in a traditional edition, we can also say that knowledge is authoritative. As you said, I'm the professor, I'm writing this, you have to trust me. Now things are changing, so the authority of the text, of the edition is changing. This is the first thing. And then here, and of course, we can't omit these things. We can't imply these things in a digital edition. And when you write here not coded, yes, in the sense not, I think this is what I understand here, is in traditional critical editions, in printed editions, we have, for example, many abbreviations and other conventions, and the apparatus criticus is the best example, because of course the technology of the book doesn't allow us to print many words. And now we can be verbose in a digital environment because we have more space, so we may need, we don't need abbreviations, for example, and other things, which is on the other side a problem, because, for example, as classicists, we are trained to use conventions, to use abbreviations, not to write too much in a printed edition, while in a digital environment, things are changing, I think. So I'm thinking loudly now with you. I'm commenting this page. So I think this point is important because the coded part especially, we need to code still something, but in a different way. And we can't omit information.
I think you are making a very good point, but you are so delicate. You don't want to say that. Of course, we are coding, but we are coding in the sense of programming.
Yes.
So, and when I use this word here, I said, I was also thinking about this. This is code like the spies communicate. They communicate in code,
yes.
But it's not computer code, of course. This is what we will come to in the next slide.
No, I wanted...
Yeah, just no.
No, Neven, thank you very much for this because we have students following us, and also some is in the call. And we have students; they are not philologists, and given that they are computer scientists, is important. This code, what kind of code we are meaning? But now you can go on.
Yeah. So when I use the word code, think about the James Bond code, not the Zuckerberg code or something. Yeah. Okay. So as I said, it comes with a price, and the price is that you actually have to code, because for us the digital medium forces us to not only to say everything that we know about the text, to be maximally explicit, because now we can say everything we know, and we should say everything we know. But to do so, we have to express our knowledge in a consistent way. And you all know, just as I do, how hard it is for humans to be consistent. And now, as you can see, here is the place where I thought we will have a little break, but actually Monica enabled us to have a break a little bit more. I wanted simply to ask whether you were able, just a moment, whether you were able to follow this so far. and I see that Monica has, but if anybody else has any questions, Peter?
That's fine.
Peter? Okay, so the important thing is, and you will notice also that the editions that I have shown have also been digital in a way, because they are digital facsimiles of texts, of books. They are digital replicas of analog printed objects. But these things, because they are replicas, they are not using the full potential of the digital medium. And in what follows, we will demonstrate how people are doing the same thing, expressing what they know about the historic document, but in a different way. Okay. So first, we need to know how to find existing digital scholarly editions, because we want to see what are other people experimenting with. Here, as I have said at the beginning, we have excellent help in form of two catalogs. Both are published on the internet and both are updated continuously. The first is edited by Greta Franzini, and to demonstrate how it works, I will use it to find the first editions of Latin texts, and then to see how one of the editions is described. So the link in my slides is live, and I hope that here you can see something that people in the computing will recognize as a GitHub page where Greta Franzini is sharing her code and her data for this catalog. But there is also a link under the words web application, a link to the actual database that we can, as it says here, that we can explore. And then we see, as usual, knowledge represented as a set of fields that we can write our query in. So if we want to find texts in Latin, it is simple enough for us to filter this. Now remember, this is simple for us. Hausmann would be quite surprised to see this. But under the number 12 in this list that you are hopefully looking at on my screen, there is an entry for the edition called Catullus Online. Because we started with Catullus, let's look at this and let's see how Catullus Online is described in Franzini's catalog. Now here you will notice that there are many typical points of information, because each edition is described and analyzed in a consistent way in columns and fields, and but also that those columns, those fields ask something about who is intended audience. So it says here audience specialists, researchers, students. So you can see it here. And there is also a question about the philological approach of the edition. So it says here a philological statement, and it says here something strange. So it says that account of textual variants, that this is false, but because this edition was actually done specifically to list textual variants of Catullus, I would not agree that it does not provide account of textual variants. But again, perhaps Franzini meant that Catullus Online does not do this in an explicit and descriptive way, but leaves this to us to interpret. Now, the other catalog that is helping us to find digital scholarly edition is prepared by Patrick Zale, the same guy who prepared this definition that we worked with. And in this catalog, the approach is different, because here more prominent are typology and categorization. So we see title, subject area, material, language, epoch, and even the best of, which are recommended by the editor. But it is easier for us to choose editions of Latin documents by language or material. As you can see, Latin is first, and there are 89. We know that there are 89 Latin editions, but it is not so easy for us to look for documents in Greek, because the editions of Greek documents, the number is significantly smaller, so it is listed as other. And then we have to go on through this list and to guess, if we do not already know, which edition could be in Greek. But because we happen to know that the oldest manuscript of the Bible, it says Bible oldest manuscript, is Codex Sinaiticus, and that this codex is in Greek. And of course, because today is Maundy Thursday in the Roman Catholic tradition, we will look at this description. And here you can see that this description is more narrative. It is not organized by a field. There is some signal that it should be quite a good or an interesting edition. There is a star by it, near it. And that's so this is how we want to orientate in these two catalogs. And of course, a lot of material in both catalogs is similar or even the same, but because they are described in different way, it is always useful to consult them both. They are just click away at the end. So it is time now for us to look at some digital scholarly editions, so to say, in action. And we will start with an older one, which is the Chicago Homer. And by the way, for some reason, this is not listed by either Francini or Zale. This was published in the year 2000. And I hope that the programmers among you will see that it is quite old now, but I have to admit that that it does what it needs to do for philologists. So it very clearly says what we should do. And if we want, for example, as a test, if we want to go to the book 10 of the Iliad, we simply select the Iliad, say that we want to go to the book 10, to the first line, and then we retrieve this. Now, what do we get? We see that the Chicago Homer is a bilingual edition because it has the original Greek and one of the many English translations. But we will very quickly find out that something will happen if we click on which one do you want us to click? On Neocene, perhaps. Yes. So if we click here, we will see that this edition is connected both to grammar, saying what is this form that we are looking at, but also to some statistical data about the Greek words that are used here. It doesn't end here. We can also click on English words. And if we click on English words, then we see that this edition functions as a kind of Homeric English-Greek vocabulary. So if you want to use Homer's words to write about ships, here is what you can use with a great certainty. There is more if we click on the numbers. First, if we click on the numbers in brackets, what would you think, Peter? What will happen?
The numbers in
brackets. So the one that says here is the border. Aristes Panachaion is a unit number one.
Have we got other readings, or no? There's too many of them. I'm not sure.
Let's see. So if we click on this,
Other places where it's used.
so we are actually looking, and we should be seeing this, but for some reason it doesn't show here at the moment. So, but we are looking at a Homeric formula. So I will just try to see. No, okay, we are seeing all the places where the same expression appears in the Homeric verse. So this was this important discovery by Milman Parry, that we can think about Homeric formula in a systematic way, and that this is an aspect of Homer as an oral poet that we can explore quite easily here. Now, if we want to browse one more thing, if we want to go to this small numbers, which says Iliad 10:1, we will see that, so the letters are small, but I will read this, that here we can find some readings from the papyri, because there are Homeric papyri with Homeric verses, and there are, of course, some fragments, and they are found on a certain place and so on. Also, there are scholia commenting. So these are people in the antiquity or in the Byzantine times commenting on this part of Homer. And finally, we know that Virgil's Aeneis was written very much with Homer in mind. So there are similar places, there are things we can compare between Greek and Latin, between Homer and Virgil. And this is what Chicago Homer invites us to do in a way. So we can say that for philologists, the Chicago Homer is a great resource for reading the text, for exploring the formula as the main oral literature feature of Homer. And as a bonus, we get also some selection of ancient commentaries and a first look into Roman reception of Homer. Now, the next project that I want to demonstrate again deals with Homer, but this is the Homer multitext project, which started in 2004, also quite long ago. The groundwork for this was done even earlier. But contrary to the presumption of the Chicago Homer, it does not present one Homer. And this is why it is called a multi-text. It is not a fixed text of one author, as we have seen in Chicago Homer, but this is Homer, which is a tradition not only textual, but tradition of manuscripts, of representations, and tradition of commentaries and exegetical tradition, we can say. So what happens when we start to go to Iliad, book 10, verse 1 here? We do it by saying we want to browse by Iliad reference in a way that is very similar to what we just did with Chicago Homer. We say we want to see the first 5 lines of the Iliad, book 10, and then we click on Find Folios. Now, why? Because Find Folios, because it goes from in its basis, its root is the medieval manuscript, which you see now appearing. So we don't see the text immediately. What we see is a page from a very individual manuscript. But we also see something else, and you will notice that it offers us other views. It says you can look at the passage in context, but you can also look at some combination of image, text, and folio. How we access this? We can do this by clicking on a page, and then we see a little bit further down. So we see the text that we just read in Chicago Homer, alloimen paraneus sinaristes panachaion. But we also see this, how it was written sometime in the 10th or 12th, 11th or 12th century. There's something else which is important here. So we can go on and we can go simply click on this, and then we will see the whole page of the manuscript. And when we move, we will find the region which was transcribed. And if we want to study this region, we can zoom in, and then we notice something. We notice that here we are not dealing with just one text. You will see those tiny, tiny letters. So these are the comments. These are the scholia. What we have seen in Chicago Homer as scholia are actually something like this. So we are here accessing Homer in a way that people during the Byzantine period looked at the poems. There is also something else that is interesting for our colleagues in computer science. You will notice at the top that what we are looking at is identified by the URN identifier. So each page of this manuscript has its own URN identifier, which we can use to refer to. And also each region, this is what you see on the right-hand side, has its own very special identifier. So we can very precisely refer to just this region on the image of the manuscript page. And everything that you will see in Homer multitext is described in this way. In a way, everything has a name tag on, so everything can be referred to and then retrieved by a computer program. And this is very important for digital scholarly editions. Now, if we go back, if we click on the number 2, we will go to the transcription of the scholia that we have seen. So it says here, and we can read this in a way that we are more used to this today, we can see that it reads panton ton Hellenon. So this is panton ton Hellenon. But we can also see that it says precisely to which word it refers. So explanation of the word panachaion. So the commentator was simply saying something that would be useful even today. What does panachaion mean? It means panton ton Hellenon. And in this way, even the tiniest scholium in this manuscript and in other manuscript is transcribed and linked to the place to which it refers. So I have to I want to say just one thing that was important besides developing this concept, this computationally actionable system of reference to text and object, that the Homer multitext is a result of extended teamwork, extended both over time and in place, and that significant contributions, actually those translations here, transcriptions, were made by undergraduate students, and sometimes even by high school students who were not doing this for credits, as we say here in Zagreb for ECTS, but for the pure, if I may say so, love of knowledge. Now, experiences and concepts of the Homer multitext were accepted by another project, by the Digital Athenaeus, which is a project led and in large part carried out by our Synoikisis host, by Monika Berti in Leipzig. So this, while Homer multitext had to connect Homer's words with manuscript images and medieval comments, the Digital Athenaeus presents a text which is in itself already made, and you will see here in the brief description, it is made of many texts, because sometime at the end of the 2nd century AD, Athenaeus of Naucratis pasted together somehow many interesting snippets of older texts into a description of several, he says, learned conversations. And because later a lot of ancient Greek and Latin was lost, Athenaeus is an important source for many of those texts that we cannot read today except for him, and also for much valuable information on how people lived in the ancient world. But the Digital Athenaeus offers actually 9 ways to approach Athenaeus' work, and you will notice that the text itself is not the first way. It comes only in the last row. So it is not only because this is based on earlier printed editions, but also because this is an edition which aims to connect the knowledge of these earlier editors and even tries to reconcile this knowledge. Because what is behind these CK letters? So this is behind it is a program, so to say, a calculator, who says in one edition the system of reference was this, and in another was that. So we can move between editions thanks to something like this. And also we see not one index scriptorum, so not one list of authors mentioned, but we see 2 of them, or even 3 if you count the Olson as well, index of authors, texts, and persons. And there are also dialogi personae. So there are a lot of indices to the same text, different indices to the same text. Now, as I have said, the text itself is in a way, but not in a bad way, secondary to what we have already learned about it, because we are approaching this through knowledge of other editors. And you also can see in this box number 8 that the Digital Athenaeus also uses URNs to describe references, both those made by editors and by the author himself, because you remember he refers to other authors, to other Greek writers, and so on. So if we need to find a quotation of an ancient authors, we can follow the example here, and we can see first. So we can see first what a reference to a quotation in Athenaeus looks like. So the reference here, the 3rd one, says that this work represents the Athenaeus Deipnos Sophistai. If we go to the passage, book 1, chapter 4, if we find here the first occurrence of the word aei and the first occurrence of the word exetazetai, everything that is important for us is between those words and including these words. Of course, we won't be doing this. The internet browser will do this when we click on it, and then the program will show us the part that we had in mind. So these are not Athenaeus's own words. This is him quoting another author. Which author? So if you want to know this, there are data on it. So you simply, oh, not these one, these are the grammatical data, sorry. So you simply click on the list which gives you an access to index, and then you will see that in index scriptorum there are people whose text is mentioned here, and you can find their names here, and there is also this passage that is interesting for us. So being able to refer precisely and unambiguously to a string of words, so not to a page, not to a paragraph number, not to a line number, because it changes from book to book. So it is very important for the level of explicitness and consistency which are needed in digital scholarly edition, as we have said. This makes our editions, our selections, understandable not only by humans, who are, you will remember, inconsistent, but by computers as well, who are notoriously consistent, we can say. And what can be understood by one computer can be understood and then acted on by another computer as well. So now I will only briefly point to two other examples. First, towards the Scholastic Commentaries and Text Archive, which is an important initiative because it is organized as a group. So this is not just one scholar, not just one project, but several projects. It uses computational methods which are equally advanced as those of Homer, Multitext, and the Digital Athenaeus, but it deals with Latin, and with Latin from the medieval period. Also, it is also important, you will see here this on the page, that just like the Homer, Multitext, and Digital Athenaeus, this edition insists on being open licensed. So this is not just important ideologically, because simply if you want to do something with other people's information, data, and so on, you have to be allowed to do so. And this is what the open license means. For us, we are allowed to further transform the work that is being done by other scholars. And then an even shorter note on my own work, which is an edition of the funeral oration for the Cardinal Pietro Riario, written in 1474 by Nicholas, Bishop of Modrus. Now, the note is short because the edition is not done yet, and also because I have not yet solved the main problem. Now, the idea is that we have collected the information, we have all the images, all the transcriptions, all the commentaries, all grammatical analysis, translations, everything is put into a separate file, and each element is identified, has its own URN. So everything is here. But what we have yet to solve is how to connect this together and how to connect it in a way which will enable people to navigate these connections. In a way, just as Athenaeus has started from indices, just as Homer Multitext has started from numbers of lines, we are not yet quite clear where do we want to start. So now, what do you think that we have learned? A brief discussion, if you please.
Neven, thank you very much. And of course, thank you also for mentioning the Digital Athenaeus. Well, if I can start a discussion, so I use my power as the Sunoikisis, and then I allow other people in the chat. But your last slide is important, mentioning your work on Nicolaus. You mentioned many things. First, you have, as far as I understand, you have collected the manuscripts for this author. You have the set of transcriptions. which is usually the basic thing for traditional critical editions, which is a lot, we have to remember, in the sense that when you start an edition, you have to look for manuscripts, which is a long work. Now we have many images online of manuscripts, but still, sometimes you still have to go to libraries to look for this. Then you want to transcribe them, or at least to check what is written, and then you produce your edition, which is the traditional concept of a critical edition. But after that, in your slide, you mention tokenization, sentence splitting, morphosyntactic annotation, semantic annotations, many things that we can perform now, well, automatically, semi-automatically. We have tools. How do we connect this? Yes, this is the first question. But, and this is also, I think, well, a computational problem, connecting all these things, but not only computational. But can we have all these things together? For example, the semantic annotation is an edition, or I think this slide is important because this is my personal opinion, but I would like to discuss that. And I see that in the digital community, sometimes we have a rigid definition of an edition. Of course, as classicists, as philologists, we mean an edition as a critical edition where you reconstruct the text by reading, collecting, collating manuscripts. But in a printed world, is this always true? In the sense that, I don't know what, Neven, you are a philologist, you know that there are cases where it's not really possible to read every manuscript. There are printed editions where we have scholars relying on other editions. And then in a printed world, we use the term edition also when we don't really have a new reconstruction of the text, but maybe a new just a new commentary or a new translation. So now I'm going a bit too far, but my question is about the original question. What is a scholarly edition and a digital scholarly edition? We have many things together. And today, that the digital environment allows us to do many things, for example, including also tokenization, lemmatization, semantic annotations, etc. How far do we want to go? And then, for example, a text based on an edition, but a text where we have a complete annotation of the morphology and the syntax, or annotation of the semantic, with many complexities, because annotating a text, as you know better than me, is complex. Is this an edition or not? This is an open question. We can't have an answer now because there are many things involved. But I think that your last slide was important, not only for the question, how do we connect all these things, but for many other possible questions. Now I stop because I'm talking too much.
Well, Monica, I think that first, if somebody, when the students and all of you, when you start checking out things in those two catalogs, you will notice that there is no strict format. So we have seen in printed books that the form has not changed over 200 years. And we are living now in a world where something which was done in the year 2000 already looks old. So this means that we are at the stage where we don't know yet the ideal format. So we are just experimenting. And of course, we will not be able to achieve everything that you have just mentioned. But I think that sometimes we have to try to achieve disparate things. Like, for example, to connect the history of the text to show the manuscript witnesses and the printed editions and so on, but also to show how the grammar and morphology functions in the text. Because only in the interplay of these two things, there is the real life of the text. I have to say that I don't think that a text which was read in different forms like the Homer. It is not one text simply. It is not, it was never one text. We can think about it as a one text, but it is our idea of Homer. The actual Homer is different, not only because it also exists as the Homer in Italian, in Croatian, in English, in Greek, in Turkish, in whatever language, but also because it is not really fixed. It is not fixed for people who are reading Homer today or who are watching the play based on Homer or the movie based on Homer. And these all are Homers. It is hard to represent, but we don't have to represent everything. We want to enhance, as Patrick Saleh has said, the amount of information. So we want to contribute to it. We don't need to make a definitive edition. So we will just try to do our best.
Yes, excellent. Definitely, I agree. Multitextuality and in the end, open textuality in this sense, not definitive, but experimenting a lot. And this is something that we are learning, especially coming from the traditional world. Not perfection, but experiments. No, so I have to stop because I have been talking too much. So if there are questions, we have Anise in the Hangout. Also a student from Leipzig, Osama. He was in my course last semester, so he knows now something about digital philology. Osama is a computer scientist. If you have questions, if you are still alive.
Yeah, also Peter here in Zagreb. If anybody has any questions, please.
It's okay.
We have something in the chat. Anise, for her is easier to. Neven, can you read the chat?
Sorry?
Can you read the chat on the right of your screen? You should be able to read. There is a chat.
Oh, sorry. You know that I'm not. Okay. So yeah, I saw that Anise said that working together is still a challenge. Anise, do you think that working in this format, Sinaiticus, is a challenge, or that working together on an edition is a challenge? I think that what we have, and it is interesting, this is why I wanted to show Greek, because there are actually a few people who are able to work with Greek, and these people are scattered around, we can say, around the globe today. But here we have a medium which can connect us, and if we find a way to work together, then we will be able to do something. And Anise says that digital editions require a lot of expertise. But then again, we have a very valuable resource. We have our colleagues, like in computer sciences or in digital humanities, whom we can reach out to, and we can work together with them. And then, of course, we can have arguments and fights, and in the end, there will be something that neither of us will be able to produce on our own, I think.
Yes, and then there is also the technical component, because a collaborative environment requires people, of course, which is difficult to find, with an expertise, and then a good environment for keeping track of the contribution of everyone. I was reading a book about digital critical editions, mentioning a comparison between the philological edition and an entry in Wikipedia, which is an example of a collaborative environment, because many people can edit at the same time, or at different times, the same entry. And Wikipedia keeps track of every edition. If I change a comma in an entry in Wikipedia, the system keeps track of it. I think is a good comparison, especially from a computational point of view, from a technical point of view. But still, for digital philology, okay, sometimes scholars are used to work alone, also because we need, I think, this moment where we are alone, we think. I think this is still important, but at the same time, we know Neven, so we are scholars, and many of our colleagues don't like this idea of working together, but because there is a solitary moment where we need to think our text, and then the computational part really to get to produce tools, stable tools, portable tools, which is another practical problem for philology. Money, support, expertise, and resources. But anyway, this doesn't mean that we have to give it up because we already have a lot, and you have been doing also a lot in Zagreb with your projects, showing that this is possible. I mean, so this is not impossible.
I mean, we are all here to try to. This is why I like what I like about the Sinaikisis concept, because here people see that they are not alone, and that we can go on together. So not only in the form of not only in the form of let's say a seminar or a course, but we are also here after the course ends.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Sunoikis is working, is 5 years. We are still here. Started, I still remember in a winter in Leipzig with a planning seminar in the room, fighting for the first syllabus. But we are still here, so we have a hope. Okay, so yes, okay, another comment by Anisa, thank you. And also in Brazil, so in this chat we represent many different countries, because we represent Brazil, Croatia, Syria with Osama, Italy, and Germany. I am in both countries, so we already have many languages and many countries to show that this is really possible. Okay, so the last, only one thing, and then we finish. In your description in GitHub, we have a detailed outline. So Neven wrote a detailed outline of the session of today with many links, seminar readings. So you have, this is for the students, you have readings, including also links to the 2 catalogs mentioned by Neven. And I remember that, well, Greta, she started this catalog when she was between her master and the PhD, so a young student beginning this work. I remember when she started. Further reading, and they also an essay and an exercise, so you can experiment with that. You have also the slides online. They are already online. And only a note about the Chicago Homer. Just a few days ago, there was a discussion online on the digital classicist mailing list and another mailing list, because as far as I understand, well, yes, as you said, the project is quite old. It's 20 years that is there, and they are planning to move it to a new database, and they started a discussion, and Martin Müller, he made the community asking if we are still using the Chicago Homer, if we want it, because definitely we already have, as you can see, an archaeology of digital tools, where we have tools that are already old and need to be updated. So just to, as a brief note, given that you mentioned the Chicago Homer, which is, I think, still an interesting tool. Okay, so now our time is over, 6:19, at least in Leipzig time, Zagreb time also, I think. Yes, you're in the same time zone. So, Neven, thank you very much again for your wonderful contribution to digital philology, and also to your students. It's nice to have students in our hangout. Next week, we don't have Sunoikisis, but we will have again our session on May the 2nd with programming for humanists. And then we will have Angelos Barmoutis from Florida and Eleni Bozia. They will show more programming languages and how to use programming languages in the humanities, and also how to translate programming languages from English into other languages, which is quite funny. Okay, so thank you again. See you in 2 weeks, and have a good night for those who are in this time zone. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.